There's a quiet tension that hums in the spaces between people, the words left unsaid, the gestures carefully measured. Some souls will bend, retreat, or step aside rather than face the sharp edges of disagreement. They will smile while their chest tightens, nod while their mind rebels, and drift through conversations like water avoiding rocks. On the surface, it may seem like harmony, like a preference for peace. But beneath it lies a more complex truth, a subtle struggle between fear and self-preservation, a silent negotiation with their own emotions. Avoiding confrontation is not laziness. It is a choice rooted in layers of thought, emotion, and history that most of us barely notice. At its core, avoiding confrontation is about more than just discomfort. It is a form of emotional navigation, a way to preserve relationships, or even a self-protective mechanism. People who shy away from conflict are often hyper-aware of tension, the smallest raise of a voice, the slightest edge in a tone, and they instinctively step back. Psychologists refer to this as conflict avoidance, a behavioral pattern shaped by personality, upbringing, and early social experiences. What makes this behavior fascinating is how it influences both personal and professional life. It can prevent arguments, yes, but it can also leave desires unspoken, boundaries unclaimed, and resentment quietly accumulating. For some, avoiding confrontation is an artful dance, a careful calibration between honesty and safety. For others, it's a habit born from anxiety, shame, or fear of rejection. Understanding why people avoid confrontation helps us see not just the surface behavior, but the invisible emotional currents that guide their choices. One of the most common psychological roots of confrontation avoidance is the fear of negative evaluation. Simply put, these individuals are deeply attuned to how others perceive them. From childhood, they may have learned that disagreement leads to punishment, criticism, or withdrawal of affection. Imagine a child who speaks up and is met with anger, embarrassment, or cold silence. Over time, that child internalizes a lesson. To stay safe, I stay quiet. Adults carry this imprint forward in subtle ways. Even in a boardroom or friendship, the fear of being judged harshly can make a person hesitate, soften their words, or completely avoid expressing dissent. Another layer is empathy taken to an extreme. Some people avoid confrontation not because they fear themselves, but because they fear the emotional impact on others. They sense tension before it erupts, and their mind begins calculating. If I speak my mind, will this hurt them? Will it create pain I can't undo? Psychologists call this other-oriented sensitivity, a heightened emotional intelligence that can feel like a gift until it becomes a burden. In a personal relationship, this might look like someone agreeing to plans they don't enjoy, nodding along in conversations they silently question, or stepping aside when a decision doesn't reflect their true feelings. The act of avoiding confrontation is a way to protect harmony, but it comes at the cost of personal clarity and authenticity. Even the simplest encounters can reveal the weight of this behavior. Picture a friend who notices a slight injustice in a group conversation but remains silent, smiling politely. Or a co-worker who agrees to take on extra work rather than risk the tension of saying no. Their choices are not careless. They are calculated, shaped by years of navigating a world that has taught them to weigh every word and anticipate every reaction. Beneath the surface, there is a constant inner dialogue, weighing risk, predicting outcomes, managing emotions. Avoiding confrontation is rarely a lack of courage. It is courage quietly measured, weighed against potential emotional fallout. Understanding the psychology of confrontation avoidance invites us to look deeper into the human experience. These individuals are not simply passive. They are negotiating the delicate balance between self-preservation and connection, between honesty and harmony. They reveal a paradox of human behavior. The desire for peace can sometimes shadow the need for authenticity. And yet, there is more beneath these patterns, layers of unconscious habit, coping strategies, and subtle personality dynamics waiting to be uncovered. In the next part, we will explore how these tendencies shape relationships, influence decision-making, and sometimes ripple quietly through every interaction, leaving traces of unspoken emotions that define the spaces between people. For now, the gentle art of avoiding confrontation shows us a truth often overlooked. Silence is never simple, and peace can be complex. Beyond fear of judgment and extreme empathy, confrontation avoidance can take on subtler, less obvious forms. Some individuals are guided by an internalized narrative of control, the belief that by avoiding conflict, they can prevent chaos. They observe patterns in social dynamics and intuitively calculate which words will escalate, which gestures will soothe, which silences will protect. Psychologists call this a form of anticipatory social strategizing. It is not merely shyness. It is a vigilant, almost tactical approach to human interaction. Others are motivated by identity and self-concept. People who view themselves as peacekeepers or the calm presence often feel an unspoken obligation to maintain emotional equilibrium in their surroundings. Their avoidance of confrontation is less about fear and more about living up to a self-image they've cultivated over years. In friendships, families, and workplaces, they may absorb tension like a sponge, quietly regulating emotions around them to prevent discomfort. It is an invisible labor, rarely acknowledged, yet deeply impactful. There are also personality-based tendencies. Highly sensitive individuals, introverts, or those with anxious attachment styles often experience confrontation as an amplified stressor. Even minor disputes can trigger a cascade of physiological responses: racing heartbeat, shallow breathing, a tightening chest. In these moments, stepping back is not just a choice, it is instinctual survival. Meanwhile, those with more assertive personalities might see the avoidance as puzzling or frustrating, missing the layers of complexity beneath the silence. Confrontation avoidance can also shift over time. Some people oscillate between passivity and assertiveness depending on context, relationship, or mood. They might remain silent with strangers but speak boldly with loved ones, or vice versa. This fluidity reflects a profound adaptability, the mind constantly weighing risk, outcome, and emotional cost. It reminds us that avoidance is rarely static. It is a living, evolving negotiation between self, others, and the unspoken rules of social life. When we pause to consider the inner world of those who avoid confrontation, we glimpse a quiet courage. Their courage is measured, deliberate, hidden beneath layers of calculation and restraint. It is courage not shouted or visible in dramatic moments, but courage lived quietly, in choosing to preserve connection, to absorb tension, or to navigate a world that can feel volatile. Yet there is a subtle cost. Long-term avoidance can leave emotions unprocessed, desires unvoiced, and boundaries blurred. The heart learns restraint, but sometimes forgets expression. In relationships, this can look like compromise carried too far, or a quiet accumulation of resentment. It is a delicate tension. The mind seeks peace, the heart seeks authenticity, and the soul negotiates in silence. And still, this pattern carries wisdom. Avoiding confrontation can cultivate patience, observation, and empathy. It can sharpen perception, attune one to nuances in tone, body language, and unspoken needs. In a world that often prizes boldness and immediate assertion, there is an understated power in the ability to listen, to reflect, and to respond with care. It reminds us that human resilience does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Recognizing this balance invites compassion. For ourselves, for others, for those moments when we choose silence over speech. We begin to see that confrontation avoidance is not simply a flaw or fear. It is an expression of complex emotional intelligence, a strategy shaped by history, temperament, and circumstance. In understanding it, we see both the vulnerability and the depth of the human spirit. Confrontation avoidance teaches us about the subtle architecture of human emotion. It shows us that courage is not always loud, that honesty can take many forms, and that peace often comes at the cost of quiet negotiation. It asks us to reflect. When do we speak? When do we step back? And what stories of fear, empathy, or strategy shape those choices? Which one are you? The observer, the absorber, the peacekeeper, or the careful strategist? If this perspective has shifted the way you see people around you, Take a moment to notice the silences, the subtle gestures, the words left unspoken, and if it resonates, join our community to explore the layers of human psychology together. Because understanding the quiet corners of behavior can illuminate the loudest truths of connection. In the end, avoiding confrontation is neither weakness nor avoidance alone. It is a window into the soul, revealing how we navigate tension, emotion, and the desire for connection. It is the art of choosing every day what to voice and what to hold. And in that choice lies a profound reflection of who we are. Silence in the right hands becomes not absence, but presence. A presence that carries weight, intention, and depth,